Welcome to the Grandpa Channel, where stories don't fade, they get recorded. I'm Steve Harris. My grandkids call me Ritters. This podcast is where grandpas and grandchildren pull up a chair, turn on a mic, and let her rip. Grandpa stories are chock full of wisdom, life lessons, and frankly funny as hell. Your stories are the magic elixir to help your grandkids navigate Mr. Toad's wild ride, aka life. Let's Grandpa. This episode of the Grandpa Channel is brought to you by Hires Big H, home of wonderful hamburgers, French fries, onion rings, the magical and medicinal, so I say, root beer freeze. Head to Hires and treat yourself like the legend that you are. Now back to the channel. Hello and welcome to the Grandpa Channel. Today we have a friend of the Grandpa Channel, a lovely, wonderful person, Ashtyn Salazar. Thank you for coming. And she has a company called Planted Media, which we'll learn about this as we talk. So Ashtyn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me here. First of all, a little bit about me. I am a wife, a daughter, soon to be mom come June.
Yeah.
I am a self-proclaimed foodie and love finding new places to eat and good food. And I'm an old soul. I love all things, vintage, school music.
You kind of like my music, man.
I'm a Fleetwood Mac girl.
Are you?
Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald.
So what is it, your old soul? What does that stem from? Was this something you walked into in Talladega?
I was born with that. I don't know. Even from the time I was a little girl, my mom talks about how she was going to not raise a girly girl. She was going to have a strong-willed woman, which I think worked out in a way, but she had bought me like bug bedding for my crib and was, kind of leaning that way. And she said, I just always wanted to wear dresses. I always wanted to just be in the garden with flowers. And she had a CD. It was a Pottery Barnes Kids CD that had all these old music like Louis Armstrong and Judy Garland. And that was my favorite music listening to growing up. And so I don't know if it was that CD in particular, or just my personality, but as the years went on, I realized that's a huge part of who I am.
So tell me how this old soul of yours got involved in what you're doing, and explain what you're doing.
Okay, so at Planting Media, we are aiming to share the stories that root us. That's our whole tagline, meaning we want to share the stories that make us who we are. And I tell people, you inherit blonde hair or brown eyes or blue eyes or whatever it is, but you also inherit personality traits from your ancestors, including strength and wisdom and courage. And we feel it's important to document those stories so that generations to come can see and hear those stories for themselves. So it started clear back in probably like 2019. I studied sports media at college. I went to BYU and had grand plans to be the next Holly Rowe or Laura Rutledge. And it was a great experience. I did feature films for BYU TV Sports, helped produce their daily sports talk show. And then I got married and realized I really like nights and weekends with my husband. And so I started looking at different options that I could pivot towards. Well, around that same time, it was 2020, and my grandma, Connie Plant Kern, she had been fighting a 15-year battle with MS. And so the way I knew my grandma was pretty much in a hospital bed, couldn't really move very much, but was still magic in every way. I mean, she would tell us silly stories and nursery rhymes and encourage us to go pick her flowers, and we'd come back and she'd teach us how to press them or make flower crowns and things that were really impactful to me, seeing her in such a difficult state, but she still had these stories to tell. And in 2020, October, she ended up passing away. And I was really bummed I didn't do more to capture those stories, because I remembered a couple, as, you go, especially when you go to like funerals or life memorial services, you realize with everyone talking how much you have forgotten. And I realized Dad said, there's got to be something and some way to preserve these more than just a journal, because you can read a journal, but I can't hear her voice. I can't hear her laugh. I can't see the expressions, when she's telling stories.
The cadence of her speech.
Exactly. And so at that point, I kind of started exploring this realm of video storytelling. I was doing something very similar for BYTV, where we were doing it with coaches and athletes. And I said, if people want this for coaches and athletes, they would probably want it for their family members too. So started thinking about it, but kind of just pushed it off. And over time, like, I just kept getting this feeling. And I'd tell my husband and he'd say, you need to pursue this. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't really make sense. And starting a business is scary. And friends and family and so many encouraging people who pushed me to take the leap. And so it was November of 2022. We officially launched and said, hey, we're going to do this. And since then, we've met so many incredible people and gotten to do so many videos for people that have amazing stories, because I'm a firm believer everyone has a story to tell and it's important to document. I mean, we did one for you, and
it was a great experience, by the way.
Thank you. It was great for me, and I honestly feel selfish sometimes because my job is just listening to cool people's stories and being inspired by them, and it's been something that truly has shaped me. Just from hearing other people's experiences, I feel lucky to do so every day.
What are some lessons you've learned from talking to people? Now, are most of the people you've talked to, now I'm super young, 69 years old, but what are some lessons that you can cull out of these interviews that you've done?
Absolutely. Well, 69, you look great. I would never invite you.
I'll pay you later.
Okay. I think one that's really interesting that I found that I don't think I was expecting was families are not all that different. I think obviously family dynamics, different families go through different hardships, but at the end of the day, we were all sent to earth in a family, and that brings its own unique challenges. And oldest siblings, when I interview them, typically have similar sentiments, and youngest siblings have similar sentiments that they all talk about. And it's cool to see that while your experience is your own, you can find strength and commonality amongst so many other people. And that's another lesson, whether that's in a family or an individual or a spouse, you find that everyone's just trying their best and everyone's just trying to make it through this life in the best way they know how.
I find personally that curiosity is very, very important. And I think curiosity, is a sign of affection and love to the person that you're talking to. Because if you are genuinely curious, not in a nosy, tell us the worst thing that's ever happened to you sort of thing, but I think that people respond to genuine, sincere curiosity. And that's what I felt when you were interviewing me, that I felt like I could kind of open up. What role do you think curiosity plays for you and for other people?
That's a great question. I think curiosity is what keeps us moving forward, because if we just assumed we knew everything, we're going to learn some really hard lessons. Where if we're curious and we ask people about their experiences, so many things can be avoided. I mean, there's a quote, and I butcher it every time, but history not learned or it's history repeated. And if you can go to your parents or your grandparents or even coworkers, friends, cousins, you can go to them and say, hey, what was your experience with blank? And their experience, then you avoid so much heartache or maybe hard lessons in your own life. And so much of when we do these interviews is really just a genuine interest from the family members of what this person's experience has been. Because, we send out a questionnaire to the family ahead of the interview and say, what are the most important stories or questions that you'd like documented, so that we can make sure, I go to ask tell me about your childhood. How did you meet your spouse? That sort of thing. But I don't know to ask about the one family trip you take every year to the lake, right? That sort of thing. Or the details of specific stories that families have heard and they want documented.
That they sometimes want to hear over and over
Yeah.
and over again. Never embellish. Never. Never embellish.
Even still, it shows the personality of the person telling the story. And so when you pair that with truly just a genuine curiosity, because like I said, I'm the luckiest girl in the world to just sit and hear people's stories. And you talked about going over time. Usually it's my fault because I'm sitting here like, well, tell me more and tell me more. Because it's just incredible what people, once their mind gets thinking, can remember.
So now, based on your experience, this is going to be a tough question that I haven't cleared with you before. But I run into a lot of people, a lot of grandpas who say, I'm not a good storyteller, or I don't have any stories. How do you respond to that? And do you have any suggestions of how grandpas can pull stories out of their life, hopefully that they'll be sharing with their kids, but especially with their grandkids? I'd love to hear your take on that. It's like a multi-pronged question.
It is so real. And, we went to Roots Tech this last March and would have people come up to the booth and I'd say, is this something you'd be interested in or you'd be interested in for your parents or what have you? And they'd say, well, I just am not good with stories and I don't have anything that anyone wants to hear. And the first I would say, stop right there.
And you're a nice person. You don't say.
Yeah. It was a stop right there. What brings you to Roots Tech today? And so we'd start talking and you get chatting and then I'd say, okay, well, that's really interesting. Where did you find a love for genealogy? Where did you get this passion for family history? And then they start talking about their family. And then they start talking. And once you can get someone talking about things that they're passionate about, you realize everybody has a story to tell.
Stories, plural. I totally agree with you. And I think once you kind of break the dam, blow up the dam, that all of a sudden everything kind of comes out, which is really a cool experience. And I can tell you from personal experience that preparing for my interview with Ashtyn, and then just over the last year or two especially, I've been trying to think of stories that I can share with my grandkids. That it's like opened up my 69-year-old. I see the hand of God everywhere. And I see it in my grandmother, my Danish grandmother. I see it in just all these really cool places that I find that kind of downloading my stories really helped me kind of see things more clearly. And I spent about a 2 or 3 month period is it within the last year where I'd take my phone, is so low budget, and I'd have kind of 2 or 3 words or a storyline in my head, and then I would just talk to the phone. And I am not comfortable in front of a camera. This is really, really difficult. I have made for radio. Okay, so we'll get that out a little bit. But it just helped me see things. And I'm so excited that I want to help grandpas unlock or blow up this stupid dam of, I can't do this, it isn't going to work, I don't have anything interesting to say. But I have a lot of interesting things to tell you about my ancestors. Well, it's always, I think, it's both your stories, their stories. And when you think about it too, grandpas are this wonderful repository of stories about ancestors because their dad will be their grandchildren's grandfather. If you knew, I mean, there's just this ripple effect that you can go back in time. And I know stories that will break your heart about my third great grandfather who died in prison, in Danish prison. He was a watch thief. And he died, he did extensive stints in Danish prisons. And he, it just breaks your heart. And we visited the place where the mass grave, where all of these inmates who died in prison was. And it just about tore my heart in half. These are all things that sometimes curiosity kills the cat. Don't want to kill the cat, but, it sure helps open with talking with people. And one of the end results with talking with Ashtyn was that I had a flood of other memories come by and come into my mind, and I have this desire now to share, and I want to help. I want to help grandpas and kind of bust loose with these memories. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to talk about you.
Well, I think that was perfect. And that is the best way to explain it is when a memory comes to mind, share it. That's kind of my biggest piece of advice to grandpas specifically, or grandmas or whoever, is when something brings to mind a memory, share it. Because at least you have put that out there for whoever is listening, your grandkid, your child, your niece, your nephew, whoever, to at least hear the story. And then if they want to ask, which hopefully they will, if they want to ask further questions, they can. But by you simply sharing a story, you open up a world of opportunity and communication, which is so crucial because sometimes, unfortunately, I think the generational gaps are really intimidating. And sometimes, as grandchild, I think, well, maybe they don't want to share this because it's too personal, or maybe they don't want to talk about this because, this, that, or the other. And as a grandparent, maybe it's, oh, well, they don't care about my stories. But when you can just let those things go and just say, here's a story, take it and do with it what you will, that means all the world. I think back to my mom's father, maternal grandfather. I adore both my grandparents, but there was a specific time we were at our family cabin and my mom had pulled out some supplements to take, and my grandpa goes, supplements remind me of when I was a kid. My mom had read this book on supplements and was so passionate. She had her spurts of what she was passionate about, and she became really passionate about supplements. And so for breakfast, she'd put supplements on a dish, and that would be like, here you go. You gotta take your breakfast. And it was so funny to hear that because it was just a spur of the moment memory. And I was able to say, well, that connects why my family's very into health, or this, that.
You connect the dots.
Exactly. And
right.
It gave me more perspective on his mom and how he grew up. Things like that, where it seems like just a silly little story, but just that memory meant so much and stuck with me to say, my grandpa wanted to share that with me, and I'm going to remember that. Same thing, with my father's father. He will just kind of share stories here and there. Each time I'm so grateful that they're willing to let me into those moments that they've had throughout their life.
Do they like what you do? Are they interested in what your passions for planted media is?
Yes. And my dad's father, my grandpa, we actually did his video, and it was about 5 years ago. He was the first one I ever did to see if I enjoyed it, loved it. But we're coming up now on having to do another video for him because he's lived so much life in 5 years. And so we've done his video, and now he'll send me texts, hey, I just had another story I want to document. I'm not going to forget. I say, okay, we'll get that on the list. Grandfather yet, because he's been a little nervous. But
yeah,
I think with time, they start to realize, love them so much. It's not for you. It's really not. It's for generations to come to be able to see you and remember you for who you were.
So, more personal level, grandpas. And then did you ever know your great-grandparents at all?
So, as for my grandpas, they are two of the best people I know. I am so, so lucky. And very different in ways and very similar in others. My dad's dad was a seminary teacher, and then when he got home from seminary, he would do drywall and have a business. Very, very hard worker. When my dad was in high school, he got called to be a chaplain in Desert Storm. And so he went to Germany and served as the colonel chaplain there. And, gave me a real appreciation for our country, for hard work, and for faith and religion and that sort of thing.
Was he funny?
Very, well, yes, funny, but not in like a joking manner. Funny in he's the kind of guy who's going to come up to you and put his arm on you and give you talking to, and you're kind of just like, okay, this is just grandpa, and this is
Is grandpa being grandpa?
Yes,
Yeah.
but loving. And again, he puts his hand on your shoulder, and you just feel so loved. My mom's dad was we called him a mad scientist. He had his own lotion company that he would run out of the basement. So again, very hard worker, but was also a principal. He was the academic vice principal at the University of Idaho, and gave me a real appreciation for education and learning. But also, the thing I love most about him was his example of love. He was the one married to my grandma who had MS. For 15 years, just took care of her. And
what a fabulous example.
Yeah, just, it would be really hard to have your spouse in a bed, especially when my grandma was so active beforehand. She loved skiing, she loved hiking, she wanted to be outdoors. And to watch your person become a completely different person would be really difficult, but he never, ever complained. Watching his example was one of the biggest blessings in my life because I think it taught me what true love is.
Tell me about your great-grandfathers. What do you know about them?
My great-grandfathers, I got to meet one, and we always called him Grandpa. I don't know how that came to be, but it was just Grandpa. And he was a cowboy. He loved his horses. We have a family cabin in Island Park, and that's usually where I saw him. But he passed away when I was about 8, so I don't remember him super well. And then another great-grandparent that I've heard a lot about is my great-grandpa. He served in World War II, and it's beautiful. Him and my great-grandma wrote letters the whole time he was in the war.
Those letters.
We have the letters, and being able to read those is really special. She was Lutheran, and he was LDS, and she said, well, if you're LDS, why do you smoke? I don't understand.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And he said, I'm never going to do it again. And he threw away the cigarettes and he never smoked again. Their story is just like so romantic to me. But I never got to meet him. I never got to meet either great-grandpa on my dad's side, but heard great things. And as I do more and more family history, it's really encouraging to be like, wow, I come from some cool people.
I imagine, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but as you do these interviews, you can feel and see almost the connections going back in time. And I think that I like to kill two birds with one stone, and I'd like to think that some of these stories I tell my grandkids, though not specifically designed for my kids, they might be rolling their eyes. There's a lot of eye rolling that goes on in my family when I talk and do things. I should be really concerned about that, but I just ignore it. But I just think that, there's this connection that happens, and it's intensified, I think, when we share stories. And I just think that there's a reticence on a lot of grandpa's parts of, I don't tell a good story. My life's just been, nothing really to write home them. But some of the details of my life might be absolutely fascinating to my grandkids and maybe even some of my kids. And I would think, that's what's so great about that, but you kind of share it. And what would you say this is a good question. So what would you say to a grandpa who's sort of on the fence and thinking, my life is good or maybe not so good? I don't have any interesting stories, but if you remind him and say, well, your grandkids and your kids want to hear this, how would you make a pitch to someone who's to a grandpa who's sort of on the fence, and then how would you make the pitch to him?
Oh, great question again. The pitch I would give is reminding them that their stories matter. It doesn't matter how entertaining or not entertaining they think those stories are. They're important to document because at the end of the day, what we're all seeking in life is human connection, and especially with those we are related to. It's why there are shows like on BYU TV, Relative Race. It's why, hundreds of thousands of people go to Roots Tech each year because we crave human connection with one another. And it's great to document the stories where you had this big, life-altering event that shaped you into who you are. Those are really cool stories. But the ones that I find mean the very most to people are the ones of just day-to-day life. Because when your grandkids go and listen to that story of, one day I went to work and I brought my sack of lunch and had a really hard time, but there was an extra Oreo in my pack. And that showed me that God loved me. Something like that brings humanity into it. And all of a sudden, your grandkid who's hearing the story says, you know what? Grandpa wasn't that much different than I was. And he lived day to day and made it through hard times, good times, sad times, happy times. I can do that too. And there is beauty in the simplicity of stories. And so don't feel the pressure that you have to have the most elaborate stories, that you have to be the best storyteller. Just you being you is enough and will be a blessing for generations to come.
Okay, you've convinced me. Where do I sign it? Wait a minute, I already did.
You did it!
Anyway, I want to really thank Ashtyn for coming on, and she's given me, I just think stories are so important, and you don't have to think that your stories are all that great. And there's this, like you say, there's this humanity that comes out in a kind of a connection, and we do crave connections. So I'd like to thank Ashtyn for coming here and tell you again that I had a wonderful experience of telling stories and being asked questions by Ashtyn, and I can hardly wait to see the final product. But thank you for coming.
It's going to be great, and everyone should be excited for any story you're willing to share. And this whole podcast is such a great idea and does establish more connections. I appreciate having me on.
Thank you very much. That's it for today's episode of the Grandpa Channel. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or better yet, tell your favorite grandpa. We're on a mission to gather 1 million grandpas, storytellers, wisdom keepers, and lovable wild cards. Until next time, keep the mic hot, the memories fresh, and the jokes just slightly inappropriate. I'm out of here.